Rendering mermaid scales doesn't have to make you cry, unless you want it to. It's finally Mermaid! And you're probably sketching 1,000 fish ladies and wondering, how do I make their tails not look like a cheap toy from McDonald's? Today, I'm going to show you 5 different ways to render mermaid tails. Some of these are ideal for the I just want to finish this in 5 minutes type of artists, and others, well, let's just say, grab a snack and cancel your plans. But I promise you, today you'll discover at least one method you can implement on your art style. Let's dive in. The first way to render scales, I'ma call it the lazy method. No shame, we've all been there. With this method, you want to use pre-made texture brushes to stamp in a scale pattern. It could be a brush to get the contour of each scale, which then you'll just color in whichever way you prefer. This is great if your art relies a lot on line art, or a brush texture to get that rendering faster. The funny thing about this is that you don't even need a specific scale brush. Ovals, triangles, even a glittery shimmer brush can do the job. This method is perfect if you're in a rush or just don't want to torture your hand drawing and painting each scale individually. But I'd recommend you don't rely solely on these brushes and manually add beads of light and shadows on key spots to make the texture more believable and matching with the rest of your coloring. Actually, if you need to draw lots of scales on your everyday work, maybe because you have a webtoon with lots of mermaid characters, Lord have mercy on you, the best thing would be to make yourself a brush with the shape of the scales that will perfectly fit your art style, just so you can work faster and not having to do that many touch-ups later. Method 2 is the masochist. If you pick this one, you're a little unhinged, but honestly, I respect that. Basically, you're going to draw and paint each scale individually. It's not a method I'd recommend to beginners because it requires a very solid understanding of volume. Well, any of the methods in today's video will work best if your sense of 3D is top tier, but this one in particular is where you can screw up big time if you're lacking on that department. A good cheat code is to draw some guidelines to better imagine the volume of the tail. Sketch a mesh or wrap ring-like shapes around the tail like you're dressing it in some invisible fishnet tights. Whatever helps you visualize the volume. And make sure you're layering the scales to better represent that some of them are on top of the others, just like on a real fish. If you have a piece of fabric with sequins nearby that you can use for reference, it's basically that kind of layering. Though I guess you could also do fine without the layering if you're looking for a more reptilian-like vibe, sort of like square tags. This method is quite time-consuming, so you gotta be incredibly patient to get through it. But you can always vary the level of detail and refinement. I mean, you don't have to detail scales that are deep into the shadows or maybe far away like around the tip of the tail. If you're a digital artist, you could also copy-paste some sections and fill in the remaining gaps for an apparently high detailed look, but still add natural variations that can make the tail look more organic. Whew, okay, I need a break. That method was a lot. If you also need to catch up your breath for a moment and want to learn even more rendering techniques, on my Patreon you'll find full-length art tutorials, brush packs, insights on my drawing process, and much more exclusive content to help you level up your art skills, especially for things like shading, how to improve your sense of volume, light theory, and much more. So if you're doing Mermaid this year and want to get better results, come join us on the Patreon fam. Alright, method number 3, the painterly style. This is my favorite one because it's a combination of the previous two. Detailed but still lazy enough to not destroy my tiny brain. Basically, you want to simplify your coloring by separating the main light from the main shadows. And then you want to carve the volume of the scales to put it somehow by bringing colors from one side to the other. Just like on the first sample with the pre-made brushes, you can use a brush tip that's round or triangle-like or square-like, anything that would suit your art style or the look you're trying to get on that mermaid's tail. To me, this way of rendering works best on a single layer because the point of it is to keep picking colors here and there to get more color variety in a natural way. But you do you. With this method, we're focusing on the implied texture rather than tiny details of it. We just want to make the scales recognizable, but without giving away all of our precious time and energy. It's much faster, and from a distance, it still reads like a scale-like texture. Though if the previous method heavily relied on your 3D knowledge, this one also relies a lot on your ability to use contrast. So make sure to put your image through a black and white filter if you have problems with that. For example, by filling a layer on top of everything with black and switching the layer mode to color, so you can see if there's enough difference between the light and the shadows. Or if you're a traditional artist, just take a quick picture of your current process and use any app on your phone to put it through a black and white filter. This will help you determine whether you need to increase the contrast between your light and shadows or not. Next one, I'm gonna call it the precision method, for those who want sharp scale shapes but don't want to put up with paint strokes as on the previous one. This time you're gonna use the lasso tool. Make sure you have it on addition mode or just hold shift while you're using it to be able to make several selections at the same time. And you want to make small selections in any of the shapes we've seen in previous examples: circles, triangles, rectangles, or just an ambiguous blob, to be honest. Don't overthink this too much. You don't have to cover the whole tail with these selections, but rather just a section of it. And then go to Select, Convert to Selection Layer to save the selection among your layers. You can now hide that green mask and recover the selection by right-clicking on the layer and create a selection with the content of that layer. Now pick the airbrush, or really any brush of your preference, and go all over that selection to add a subtle idea of the scale texture. If the colors are too bright or they just don't match with the rest of the piece, you can lower the layer's opacity or go over that selection again with a slightly different color, or use the hue saturation filter to play with the colors until you get something you like. And you can keep making more selection masks anywhere you need them, to keep adding more scales of different colors, more shadows, subtle reflected light, etc, etc. The goal isn't perfection, but just adding enough structure to fake detail without giving your hand a severe case of carpal tunnel. This method is also very helpful if you struggle with pressure control or have shaky hands that will make it hard to use the painterly method or the masochist method, for example. It can get you a very graphic and clean finish if you're into that kind of look. And since you are saving all the selections, it's also super easy to go back to them and adjust only parts of the tail without having to redraw them from scratch. And lastly, the method that breaks all the rules, the no scales method. Yep, you heard me right. You can skip drawing the scales entirely and paint it like a regular flat surface, such as the skin, clothes, or whatever. Mermaids are fantasy creatures. We don't have any scientific studies on their tail biology, so go wild. Take advantage of that freedom and just don't add scales if you don't want to. I mean, Disney used the most plain design on the Little Mermaid characters, and everyone welcomed it with open arms. So why can't you do the same if you like that aesthetic already? It's also the easiest and fastest method, so I think those two pros are more than enough reason to pick this one. Especially when you're working against the clock. Every minute counts. And that's it. 5 different ways to paint mermaid tail, from ultimate boss detail madness to full-on lazy mode. Mermaid is your time to experiment, so don't stress about getting it perfect. Just have fun with it. If you found a favorite method today, or if you've got your own way of rendering scales, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Let's share ideas and make this mermaid extra inspiring for everyone. And don't forget to like the video if this helped you, and maybe subscribe if you want more tips to improve your art. Good luck with your mermaid drawings. Keep on practicing, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!